He stood at the altar looking like $1 million, smiling at the woman he destroyed our 20-year marriage for. He thought he had won. He thought he had the money, the status, and the girl. But he didn't know that in exactly 5 minutes, a man was going to walk through those church doors and turn his perfect wedding into a nightmare. But why did it end like this? How did I manage to pull the rug out from under him right at the moment he thought he was safe? And what happened next that left him humiliated in front of everyone? I'm Sneha and I'm here with you to reveal the truth. Let's dive into the full details of this story. The champagne glass in my hand felt heavy, not because of the crystal, but because of the weight of the lie I was living. I stood near the back of the ballroom, leaning slightly against a velvet draped pillar, watching him. Mark, my husband of 20 years. He was standing in the centre of the spotlight, literally and figuratively. The room was filled with the city's elite. Business tycoons, logistics partners, potential investors, and every single pair of eyes was glued to him. He looked magnificent, I have to give him that. At 45, Mark had that rare, rugged charm that only seemed to get better with age. His tuxedo was tailored to perfection, hugging broad shoulders that I used to massage after 18-hour shifts in our garage office. He held the microphone with the ease of a rock star, flashing that dazzling, crooked smile that had made me fall in love with him 2 decades ago. Thank you, everyone. Mark's voice boomed through the speakers, smooth as silk. This award, the Entrepreneur of the Year, it isn't just about numbers. It's about vision. It's about having the guts to see a future where no one else sees anything. It's about standing alone in the storm and steering the ship. The crowd erupted in applause. Men nodded in respect. Women gazed at him with admiration. I clapped too. I smiled too, but inside my chest, my heart was slowly breaking to 1,000 visible pieces. Standing alone in the storm, I looked down at my hands. These hands had signed the first loan documents when Mark's credit score was too low to even rent a car. These hands had packed the first 1,000 boxes of inventory when we couldn't afford staff. These hands had held his head when he was crying on the bathroom floor in 2008, terrified we were going to lose everything. He wasn't standing alone. He never had been. I was the one holding the umbrella. I was the one reading the maps. I was the one steering the ship while he posed on the deck for pictures. But tonight, in his acceptance speech, my name wasn't mentioned, not once. I wasn't Sarah, my partner. I wasn't Sarah, the co-founder. I was just the wife in the background, the shadow behind his throne. I took a sip of the warm champagne and swallowed the bitterness. It's okay, I told myself, but this is his moment. He loves the applause. Let him have it. We know the truth. We are a team. But the problem was I wasn't sure if we knew the truth anymore. To understand the pain of that night, you have to understand where we came from. We weren't always Mark and Sarah, the logistics power couple. Once we were just Mark and Sarah. 2 broke kids in a 1-bedroom apartment that smelled like damp carpet and instant noodles. I remember a specific night about 19 years ago. It was snowing. Our old Honda had broken down and we had just lost our biggest client. We had exactly $40 in the bank account. Mark was sitting on our second-hand sofa, his face buried in his hands. I can't do this, Sarah, he had whispered, his voice shaking. I'm a failure. We should just quit. I should go get a job at the factory. I sat next to him. I didn't hug him immediately. Instead, I pulled out a notebook. I had spent the last 3 nights awake analysing market trends, finding a loophole in shipping lanes that the big companies were ignoring. Look at me, I said, lifting his chin. You are not a failure. You have the charisma. You can sell ice to an Eskimo. You just need a better product, and I have the product. I showed him the plan. I showed him the numbers. I saw the light come back into his eyes. That night, we didn't sleep. We plotted our takeover of the local market. I handled the strategy, the legalities, the complex math that made Mark's head spin. He handled the phone calls, using that golden voice to charm suppliers into giving us credit we didn't deserve. We were magic. We were unstoppable because we were 2 halves of a whole. He was the sail, catching the wind. I was the anchor and the rudder, keeping us stable and on course. For years, that dynamic worked. I was happy to stay in the background. I didn't need the fame. fame. I just wanted us to win. I wanted to build a life where we never had to worry about a $40 bank balance again. And we did. We built an empire. But success is a funny thing. It's like a drug. At first, you're just grateful to be at the party. And then you start thinking you are the party. The change in Mark didn't happen overnight. It was a slow, creeping rot. It started with small things. He stopped asking for my opinion on contracts. He started signing deals without showing me the risk analysis. When I would bring it up, he'd laugh, a dismissive, hollow sound. Relax, Sarah, he'd say, waving a hand, adorned with a Rolex I had bought him. I've got a gut feeling on this one. You worry too much. You're too rigid. Rigid. That was the first time he used a word like that to describe me. Before I was brilliant. I was sharp. And now I was rigid. Then came the separate calendars. For 18 years, we shared everything. We knew where the other person was every second of the day. Then about 6 months ago, his digital calendar went private. Why is your schedule locked? I asked one morning over breakfast. He didn't look up from his phone. It's just glitches with the server, Sarah. Besides, why do you need to know every meeting I have? Trust me, it's boring stuff. Just admin. Just admin. Mark hated admin. He hated details. If he was doing boring stuff, that meant he was doing something he didn't want me to see. But I forced myself to trust him. I forced myself to believe that after 20 years, after climbing from the gutter to the penthouse, he wouldn't throw it all away. I told myself that marriage evolves, that maybe he just needed space. I gaslit myself into silence because the alternative, the thought that he was drifting away, was too painful to bear. Back at the gala, the applause finally died down. Mark descended the stage surrounded by a swarm of admirers. I watched as he navigated the room. He looked like a king. I started to make my way toward him. I wanted to congratulate him. I wanted to touch his arm, to reconnect, to feel that spark we used to have. As I got closer, I saw him talking to a group of young women. They were marketing interns, I think, or maybe aspiring models. It was hard to tell these days. They were hanging on his every word, giggling at jokes I knew weren't that funny. And then I saw it. It was a micro expression, a tiny fleeting moment that would have been invisible to anyone else. One of the girls, a striking blonde with eyes that looked too hungry, touched his lapel. She brushed invisible dust off his tuxedo jacket. A normal, faithful husband would have flinched. He would have politely stepped back. He would have created space. Mark didn't step back. He leaned it just an inch. But that inch felt like a mile. He smiled at her, a different kind of smile. It wasn't the public figure smile. It was the smile he used to give me when we were alone in the dark. It was intimate. It was a secret shared in a crowded room. My stomach dropped. The room suddenly felt very hot. The noise of the chatter faded into a buzzing static in my ears. I froze mid-step. I couldn't go over there. I couldn't play the role of the doting wife while he was mentally undressing someone else. I turned around and walked out to the balcony. The cold night air hit my face, shocking me back to reality. I gripped the stone railing, my knuckles turning white. You're imagining things, Sarah? I whispered to the city skyline. He loves you. He's just flirting. Men like the attention. It doesn't mean anything. But deep down, in the gut instinct that had saved our business 1,000 times, I knew the numbers weren't adding up. The late nights at the office, the sudden need for client dinners on weekends, the new password on his phone, the way he flinched when I touched his shoulder yesterday. It wasn't just arrogance. It wasn't just success going to his head. There was someone else. I stood there for 20 minutes, shivering in my designer gown, waiting for him to come find me, waiting for him to realise his wife, his partner, his silent engine was missing. He never came. When I finally went back inside, the ballroom was thinning out. Mark was at the bar, laughing loudly with a glass of scotch in his hand. The blonde girl was gone, but the look on his face remained, a look of flushed excitement that had nothing to do with the award. We rode home in silence. The chauffeur drove the luxury SUV, the one leased under the company name, smoothly through the street. Mark sat on the far side of the back seat, scrolling through his phone. The blue light illuminated his face, making him look like a stranger. Did you have fun? I asked softly, breaking the silence. He didn't look up. Yeah, great night. Big night for the brand. You didn't mention the team, I said, testing the waters. In your speech. Mark finally looked at me. His eyes were cold, not angry, just empty. as if he was looking at a piece of furniture that had been in the room too long. "It was an individual award, Sarah," he said, his voice flat. "Why do you always have to make everything about you? Can't you just let me have one thing?" The accusation hit me like a slap. Make everything about me? I had spent 20 years making everything about him. "I didn't mean it like that," I stammered. "I'm tired, Sarah," he cut me off, turning back to the window. "I don't want to argue. I just want peace." That word hung in the air between us. He wanted peace from the woman who had built his war chest. He wanted peace from the only person who knew who he really was. We arrived at our estate, a sprawling mansion that felt more like a museum than a home. Mark went straight upstairs. He didn't wait for me. He didn't ask if I was coming. I stayed in the kitchen, pouring myself a glass of water. My hands were shaking. I looked around at the marble countertops, the state-of-the-art appliances, the life we had killed ourselves to build. It felt hollow. I walked up the stairs quietly. The door to the master bedroom was slightly ajar. I was about to push it open when I heard him speaking. His voice was low, hushed, but in the silence of the house it carried. He wasn't talking to himself. He was on the phone. "I know, baby," he whispered. The tenderness in his voice sent a shiver down my spine. It was the voice I hadn't heard in years. "I know, it was boring. She was there just hovering." "Yeah, I know. Soon, I promise. Just let me handle the optics. I miss you too." I stood frozen in the hallway, my breath caught in my throat, my entire world tilted on its axis. She was there, just hovering. That's what I was to him now, not his wife, not his partner, not the love of his life. I was a hoverer, a nuisance, an obstacle. I didn't storm in, I didn't scream, I didn't confront him. The old Sarah, the passionate girl who fought for everything, might have kicked the door down. But the Sarah standing in the hallway was different. She was the CEO. She was the strategist. I backed away slowly, step by step, until the sound of his betrayal faded. I went into the guest bedroom and closed the door. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the wall. The tears finally came, hot and fast. I cried for the 20 years of sacrifice. I cried for the girl who ate instant noodles so he could buy a suit. I cried for the trust that was now dead on the floor. But as the tears dried, something else replaced them, a cold, hard clarity. He thought I was weak, and he thought I was just hovering. He thought he held all the cards because his name was on the award. He had forgotten one thing. He had forgotten who handled the accounts. He had forgotten who owned the intellectual property. He had forgotten that without the engine, the car is just a piece of metal. I lay down, but I didn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling, listening to the silence of the house. Tomorrow, everything was going to change. He didn't know it yet. He was sleeping soundly in the next room, dreaming of his mistress and his vision. But he had just woken up, the one person he should have never underestimated. The shadow behind the throne was about to step into the line, and God help him when I did. The morning after the gala, the house felt different. You know that feeling when the air pressure drops right before a storm hits? That heavy, suffocating silence where even the sound of your own breathing feels too loud. That was my home. I had slept in the guest room. I told myself it was because I didn't want to wake him, but the truth was I couldn't bear to lie next to a man who was whispering promises to another woman over the phone. I woke up with swollen eyes and a headache that throbbed at the base of my skull. I walked down the grand spiralling staircase, the one we had specially imported from Italy 3 years ago. Every step I took felt like I was walking through molasses. I went into the kitchen. Mark was already there. He was sitting at the island, dressed in his running gear, looking annoyingly fresh. He was scrolling through his iPad, drinking a green smoothie, and he looked like the picture of health and success. He looked like a man who had slept perfectly. "Morning," he said without looking up. His tone was casual, breezy, as if he hadn't broken my heart 12 hours ago. "Morning," I replied. My voice sounded raspy, weak. I went to the coffee machine. My hands were trembling as I reached for a mug. It was a mug he had bought me for our 10th anniversary. It said partner in crime. I stared at it for a second, feeling a wave of nausea, and put it back. I grabbed a plain white cup instead. "You sleep in the guest room?" he asked, still not looking up. I was restless. I didn't want to disturb you," he hummed in response, a non-committal sound. "Probably for the best. I needed the rest. Big week ahead." He finally looked at me then. He scanned me from head to toe. I was wearing my old bathrobe. My hair was messy and I hadn't put on makeup yet. His lip curled slightly. It was a microscopic movement, but after 20 years, I knew every muscle in his face. It was disgust. "You look tired, Sarah," he said. It wasn't a statement of concern. It wasn't, "Oh, honey, you look tired. Let me make you breakfast." It was an accusation. It was a critique. teeth. I am tired, Mark, I said, leaning against the counter for support. It's been a long month closing the Anderson deal. Yeah, well, he stood up, wiping his mouth with a napkin. Maybe you should take better care of yourself. You've been letting yourself go lately. The bags under your eyes, they're getting noticeable. It's not a good look for the brand. The brand. I stood there stunned as he walked past me, grabbed his car keys and left. The door clicked shut and I was left alone in the silence. You look tired. I walked to the hallway mirror. I looked at myself. Yes, I looked tired. I looked exhausted. But why? I was tired because for 20 years I had carried the mental load of two people. I was tired because I stayed up until 2 a.m. checking contracts so he wouldn't get sued. I was tired because I managed his parents' doctor appointments, planned his parties and covered his stakes. I was tired because I had given every ounce of my youth, my energy and my beauty to build the pedestal he was currently standing. I wasn't letting myself go. I was giving myself away piece by piece to him. The next few days were a blur of passive-aggressive comments. He came home late every night and he stopped eating the dinners I cooked. He started locking his phone in the safe in his office. Then came Tuesday, the day the world ended. It was raining, a grey, miserable drizzle that streaked against the floor-to-ceiling windows of our living room. Mark had texted me earlier, "We need to talk. Be home by 6. We need to talk," the 4 words that can stop a heart. I spent the afternoon pacing. I tried to convince myself he wanted to talk about the business. Maybe we were being audited. Maybe he wanted to expand to Europe. Maybe he was finally going to confess about the phone call I overheard and ask for forgiveness. I practiced my reaction. I was ready to be angry, but I was also ready to forgive because I loved him. God help me, I still loved him. He walked in at 6:05 p.m. He didn't say hello. He didn't take off his coat. He just walked into the kitchen and pointed at the table. "Sit down, Sarah." I sat, and this was the same kitchen table we had bought from IKEA when we first moved into a real house. It was the only piece of old furniture we had kept. We had scratched our initials into the underside of the wood one night after a bottle of wine. It was supposed to be our anchor. Mark remained standing. He paced back and forth, tapping his fingers against his thigh. He looked energised, not sad, not nervous. He looked like a man who was about to close a deal he had been working on for months. "I'm going to make this simple," he started, stopping to look at me. "I want a divorce." The air left the room and I opened my mouth, but no sound came out. I just blinked. "Did you hear me?" he asked, impatient. "I said I want a divorce." I heard you," I whispered. "But why?" "Mark, we've been married for 20 years. We just won the award. We're at the top." "We?" he laughed, a sharp barking sound. "See, that's the problem, Sarah. You keep saying we, but look at us. Look at me and look at you." He gestured to himself then. "I am in the prime of my life. I am growing. I am evolving. I have a public image. I need to be seen with energy, with youth, with vitality." "And I don't have vitality," I asked, tears pricking my eyes. "You're comfortable." He said the word like it was an insult. "You're safe. You're a Honda Civic, Sarah. Reliable, sure. But I'm driving a Ferrari now, and you don't put Honda parts in a Ferrari." The cruelty of the metaphor took my breath away. He was comparing me to a used car. Me, the woman who taught him how to tie a tie. Is there someone else?" I asked. I knew the answer, but I needed to hear him say it. He didn't hesitate. He didn't look guilty. In fact, he smiled. A genuine, proud smile. "Yes, her name is Jessica." "Jessica?" The name sounded like a knife. "She's 24, he continued, as if reading from a resume. "She's a model. I met her at the trade show in Vegas. She's incredible, Sarah. She's full of life. She doesn't talk about profit margins or risk assessments. She talks about art, about travel, about living. She makes me feel young." "She's 3 years older than our niece," I said, my voice trembling. "Don't make this ugly," he snapped. "This isn't about age, it's about compatibility. Jessica understands the man I have become. You're still stuck in the past. You remember the broke version of me, and frankly, I don't like being reminded of him. When I look at you, I see the struggle. When I look at her, I see the victory." I felt like I was bleeding out right there on the kitchen chair. He wasn't just leaving me. He was erasing our history. He was rewriting the narrative so that I was the villain, the anchor dragging him down rather than the foundation that held him up. "So that's it?" I asked, wiping a tear that had escaped. 20 years and you just trade me in?" I deserve to be happy, Sarah, he shouted, suddenly angry. Why is that so hard for you to understand? I've worked my ass off. I built this company. I built this house. I built this life. Do I not deserve to enjoy it with someone who matches my energy? I built this company. The lie hung in the air, toxic and heavy. You built it, I said quietly. Mark, who incorporated the LLC? Who secured the initial funding? Who negotiated the exclusive contract with the shipping line? He waved his hand dismissively. Paperwork, that's just paperwork. Any secretary could have done that. I was the face. I was the rainmaker. Without me, you'd still be working in a cubicle somewhere. He leaned over the table, placing his hands flat on the wood. He looked me dead in the eye. Listen to me closely, Sarah. I've already spoken to a lawyer, a very expensive, very aggressive lawyer. We are going to do this quickly. I don't want a messy dragging out. And the assets? I asked the company. Mine, he said instantly. Obviously, the brand is me, Mark Stevens Logistics. It's my name on the door. You can't run it. You're an operational manager at best. I'm the visionary. He stood up straight, adjusting his cuffs. I'm willing to be generous, though. Because of our history, I'll give you a monthly allowance, enough to rent a nice condo somewhere, quiet, maybe out in the suburb. You can retire, read books. Do whatever it is you do. But the house stays with me. Jessica likes the pool. And the cars, well, the company owns the cars, so those stay too. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. The audacity was staggering. He wasn't just breaking up with me, he was evicting me from my own life. He was planning to move his 24-year-old mistress into my home, let her swim in my pool, let her sleep in my bed, and let her spend the money I had earned. And if I say no, I asked, if I fight? Mark sighed, looking at me with pity. Sarah, don't be stupid. You don't have the stomach for a fight. You never have. You're the silent type, the background player. If you fight me, I will bury you in legal fees. I will drag your name through the mud. I will tell everyone you were an unstable, jealous wife who couldn't handle my success. Who do you think they'll believe? The entrepreneur of the year or the tired-looking ex-wife? He checked his watch. I have a dinner reservation with Jessica at 8 o'clock. I'm going to go shower. I expect you to be gone, or at least in the guest room when we get back. I don't want her to feel uncomfortable. He turned and walked out of the kitchen. He whistled as he walked up the stairs. Whistled! I sat there for a long time. The rain continued to beat against the glass. I looked at my reflection in the dark window. You look tired. He was right. I was tired. I was tired of being the good wife. I was tired of being the supportive partner. I was tired of being the bigger person. But as I sat there listening to the water running in the shower upstairs, the shower where he was washing away our marriage to get ready for his mistress, something inside me shifted. It wasn't a loud explosion. It was a quiet click, like a lock turning. He called me a Honda Civic. He said I was just paperwork. He said I was the background player. He thought he had won because he was the loud one. He thought he had the power because he had the microphone. But Mark had made a fatal error, a mistake so arrogant, so colossal that it was almost funny. He had believed his own hype. He truly believed that he was the source of the money. I looked down at my hands again, the hands that signed the checks, the hands that managed the corporate structures. I stood up. My legs were shaky, but I forced them to hold my weight. I walked over to the drawer where we kept the spare keys. I didn't scream. I didn't break anything. I remembered the meeting I had with our corporate attorney 3 years ago when we restructured the company for tax purposes. Mark had been too bored to attend that meeting. He had just signed where I told him to sign. I remembered the specific clauses we had inserted to protect the primary guarantor, me. Mark thought I was tired. He had no idea. I wasn't tired. I was just dormant, and he had just woken up a beast he wasn't equipped to handle. I wiped the tears from my face. I walked out of the kitchen, not towards the guest room, but towards my home office. I needed to find a document, a very specific document. The sadness was gone. It had evaporated, replaced by a cold, metallic taste in my mouth. Enjoy your dinner, Mark, I thought as I opened the safe. Enjoy your champagne with Jessica. Enjoy your victory lap, because the bill is coming due, and you have no idea how expensive it's going to be. The safe door clicked open with a heavy mechanical thud. It was the only sound in the house, echoing through the empty hallway like a gunshot. Mark was gone. He was out at a 5-star restaurant pouring vintage wine for a 24-year-old girl who probably thought liquidity referred to water. He was out there living his vitality, leaving me in the wreckage of the home we had built. But as I reached into the cold metal box, I wasn't shaking anymore. My hands steady. My breathing was slow. I wasn't the Honda Civic wife he had mocked an hour ago. I was the chief financial officer, and I was conducting conducting an audit. I pulled out a thick leather binder. The spine was cracked from age. This wasn't the marriage certificate, it wasn't the deed to the house, it was the original operating agreement for Mark Stevens Logistics LLC, dated 7 years ago. I sat on the floor right there in the hallway under the dim light sconces. I flipped through the pages, page 1, page 5, page 10. Most people think business contracts are boring. They think it's just jargon and boilerplate text, but to me, contracts are poetry. They are the rules of engagement, and Mark never read poetry. I stopped at page 22. There it was, paragraph 14, subsection B. I ran my finger over the text, almost caressing the words. I remembered the day we added this. We were refinancing to buy a fleet of new trucks. The bank was nervous about Mark's spending habits. Even back then, he liked expensive toys. The bank demanded a personal guarantor, someone with a credit history that was spotless, someone whose assets were tangible and safe. That someone was me. The clause read, in the event of a dissolution of marriage or a change in primary residence of the guarantor, Sarah Stevens, all unsecured lines of corporate credit, including the black tier expense accounts and vehicle leases, shall be subject to immediate review and termination unless resecured by the remaining principal within 90 days or upon the event of the principal's remarriage, whichever occurs first. I read it twice, then 3 times. A slow, cold smile spread across my face. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of a chess player who realises their opponent has left the king completely unguarded. Mark didn't know this clause existed. He had been too busy looking at boat catalogues during that meeting. He had just asked, where do I sign so I can get the money? Clause 14B. I whispered into silence. This was my weapon. But a weapon is useless if you fire it too early. If I told him now, if I screamed and threatened him, he would go to his lawyers. He would find a way to refinance. He would find a loophole. He would prepare. No, I couldn't say a word. The next morning, I made an appointment with Mr. Henderson. Henderson was a man who looked like a bulldog in a 3-piece suit. He was expensive, aggressive, and he hated losing. When I sat in his office recounting the conversation with Mark, Henderson didn't offer me a tissue. He offered me a strategy. He wants a quick divorce, Henderson asked, leaning back in his leather chair. He wants to marry the girl. Yes, I said. He's in a rush. He thinks I'm going to drag it out because I'm emotional. Henderson tapped his pen on the desk. Good. We use that. We give him exactly what he wants. Speed. But I want to hurt him, I admitted. It felt raw to say it out loud. I don't want physical violence. I want him to feel the humiliation I felt when he called me a used car. Henderson grinned. It was a terrifying sight. Sarah, the best revenge isn't noise, it's silence. We are going to play the art of silence. We will agree to his terms. We will let him keep the house. We will let him keep the cars. We will let him think he has stripped you of everything. Why? I asked, confused. Because, Henderson leaned in, lowering his voice, when a man thinks he has won, he stops looking at the ground beneath his feet. We need him to feel so secure, so arrogant that he spends money he doesn't have. We need him to plan a wedding that costs a fortune, and then when the trap snaps shut, it will be too late, and I understood. I went home and began the hardest performance of my life. For the next 2 months, I lived in a house that was no longer mine. Mark was ruthless. He moved Jessica into the guest wing temporarily while the divorce was finalising. He said it was convenient. I had to watch her walk through my kitchen in her silk robes. I had to smell her perfume in my living room. I had to hear her giggling at my husband's jokes, the same jokes I had heard 1,000 times. One evening, I came home from work to find Jessica in the living room. She was holding one of my favourite vases, a hand-blown piece from Venice. Oh, hi, she said, looking at me with a mixture of pity and annoyance. Mark said you wouldn't be back until late. I was just thinking, this vase is a little dated, isn't it? We're thinking of redoing this whole room in something more modern, minimalist. My blood boiled. I wanted to snatch the vase from her hands and smash it. I wanted to scream that she was a thief living on borrowed time, but I remembered Henderson's words, the art of silence. I took a deep breath. I unclenched my fist. You might be right, I said calmly. It is a bit old-fashioned. You should definitely change it. Jessica looked surprised. She expected a fight. When she didn't get one, she looked bored. Right, well, just so you know, Mark and I are hosting a dinner party Friday. It would be better if you weren't here. I'll go to a hotel, I said. I walked upstairs, went into my room and screamed into my pillow until my throat felt like sandpaper. The silence was killing me, but it was also fueling me. Every insult, every discarded item, every moment of disrespect was another deposit in the bank of karma. Finally, the day of the settlement signing arrived. We met in a sterile conference room. Mark sat on one side, flanked by two lawyers who looked like they charged by the minute. Jessica was there too, sitting in the corner, texting on her phone. She shouldn't have been there, but Mark wanted an audience. I sat alone with Henderson. Mark slid the papers across the table. "It's all standard, Sarah," he said, sounding bored. "House is mine. Company is mine. You get the cash settlement we discussed and the monthly stipend for 2 years. Clean break." He didn't mention the liabilities. He didn't mention the credit line. He assumed that because he kept the company, the bank would just naturally transfer everything to him. He assumed the bank loved him. "And the wedding?" Henderson asked casually. "I hear congratulations are in order." Mark puffed up his chest. "Yes, next month it's going to be at the Vanderbilt estate. Big affair, we're expecting 500 guests. Expensive," Henderson noted. Quality costs money," Mark smirked. "But the business is booming. We can handle it. We." He was using the corporate we again, the we that was funded by my credit score. I picked up the pen. My hand hovered over the paper. "Are you sure about this, Mark?" I asked softly. I gave him one last chance, one final moment of humanity. "You're taking everything. You're leaving me with nothing but a suitcase." Mark leaned forward. His eyes were cold, devoid of the man I once knew. "You didn't earn it, Sarah. You were just along for the ride. Sign the papers." I looked at him. I looked at Jessica, who didn't even look up from her phone. "Along for the ride." I signed. I signed my name with a flourish. I signed away the house. I signed away the cars. I signed away the company title. But in my mind, I wasn't signing a surrender. I was signing the trigger mechanism of a bomb. As we walked out of the office, Mark didn't shake my hand. He high-fived his lawyer. "Done," he cheered. "Free at last." He turned to Jessica. "Babe, let's go shopping. You need that dress for the rehearsal dinner." I watched them get into the elevator. The doors closed, cutting off his laughter. Henderson turned. "The clock starts now. 90 days, or until he says I do, whichever comes first." "The wedding is in 30 days, I said. "Then we wait," Henderson said. "You need to disappear, Sarah. Let him think you're broken. Let him think you've crawled into a hole." So I did. I moved into a small apartment on the other side of the city. It was a one-bedroom walk-up. The faucet leaked and the neighbours were loud. It was a far cry from the mansion, but for the first time in years, I slept soundly. I spent my days reading, walking in the park and drinking coffee at a cheap diner. I didn't check social media, but Linda, my best friend, kept me updated. "You won't believe it," Linda told me over the phone one night. "He's renting everything, the most expensive tent in the state, imported flowers from Holland. He's booked the Philharmonic Orchestra to play him down the aisle, and he's spending money like he's Elon Musk." "Let him," I said, sipping my tea. "But Sarah," Linda worried, "he's using the company card for all of this. I saw the invoices. He's racking up hundreds of thousands of dollars. Isn't that going to hurt the business?" It would," I said enigmatically. "If he could pay it back." "Oh, what do you mean?" "Just make sure you're at that wedding, Linda, and make sure your phone is fully charged." The days ticked by. Mark's social media was a barrage of flaunting. Photos of the rings, photos of the venue, videos of him and Jessica laughing on a yacht he had rented for the bachelor party. He posted a status update. "Finally building a life with someone who matches my ambition. #power couple, #new beginnings." I didn't like the post. I didn't comment. I just looked at the calendar. 3 days before the wedding, I received a notification from the bank app on my phone. It was an alert. Credit utilisation on Stephen's Logistics corporate account has reached 95%. Total outstanding balance $480,000. He had maxed it out. He had pushed the line to its absolute limit to pay for this wedding. He was betting everything on the next quarter's earnings to pay it off. He was flying the plane at maximum altitude, unaware that the fuel tank was connected to my parachute, not his engine. I sat on my small balcony looking at the city lights. Somewhere out there, Mark probably giving a toast, thinking he was the king of the world. I picked up my phone. I had the bank's fraud department number saved. I had the leasing company's number saved. I wasn't going to do it yet. No, that would be too easy. If I cut him off now, he might be able to scramble. He might beg a friend for a loan. He might scale back the wedding. I needed to wait until he was past the point of no return. I needed to wait until the guests were seated, until the champagne was popped, until he felt the safest. I wanted the fall to be absolute. The morning of the wedding arrived. The sky was a brilliant, mocking blue. It was a perfect day for a wedding and a perfect day for a funeral. I brewed a fresh pot of coffee. I put on my most comfortable pyjamas. I sat down at my small kitchen table with my phone and my laptop. The art of silence was over. It was time to make some noise. I opened the bank portal. My finger hovered over the report change of status button. I thought about the Honda Civic comment. I thought about the you look tired comment. I thought about the 20 years of my life he had dismissed as paperwork. I didn't feel guilt. I didn't feel sadness. I felt powerful. I pressed the button. Request processing, a status updated, guarantor revoked. Action, immediate freeze on all associated accounts. The screen flashed green. It was done. The dominoes had been pushed. Now all I had to do was sit back and watch them fall. The sun streamed through the cheap blinds of my new apartment, casting striped shadows across the floor. It was 8 a.m. on a Saturday. By all accounts, this should have been the worst morning of my life. Across town at the sprawling Vanderbilt estate, the man I had loved for 2 decades was waking up in a silk-sheeted bed next to a woman half his age. He was preparing to put on a $5,000 tuxedo, paid for by a credit card with my name on the guarantor file, and pledge his eternal love to her. He was preparing to erase me. But as I sat there, cradling a mug of steaming coffee, I didn't feel like the victim. I didn't feel like the discarded ex-wife. I felt like a sniper waiting on a ridge, watching the target walk unknowingly into the crosshairs. I took a sip of the coffee. It was a cheap brand, not the artisanal Colombian blend Mark insisted on, but it tasted better. It tasted like freedom. My phone sat on the table, a sleek black rectangle, and it was innocent looking really, but in the modern world, a smartphone is more dangerous than a loaded gun if you know which buttons to press. I opened my laptop. The screen glowed to life, illumining my face. I wasn't just Sarah today, I was the ghost machine. I logged into our joint banking portal. Mark hadn't changed the passwords. Of course he hadn't. Mark thought he was untouchable. He thought I was too weak and tired to ever log in again. He probably thought I was curled up in a ball somewhere, crying over old photo albums. The dashboard loaded. I saw the numbers. Current balance, $42. Pending charges, $125,000. Catering, venue, florist. Available credit, $0. He had maxed it out. He had literally spent every single penny of the credit line I had secured for the business to pay for his personal circuit. I clicked on the transaction history. Tiffany Co., $18,000. Luxury yacht charters, $5,000. Vera Wang Bridal, $12,000. My stomach twisted. That was my credit score he was burning. That was the reputation I had built over 20 years of perfect payments, now being used to buy diamond earrings for a 24-year-old who didn't know the difference between a debit and a credit. Okay, Mark, I whispered to the empty room. You want to live like a king? Let's see if you can pay the taxes. I picked up my phone. The first call was to the bank, specifically the private wealth management division. I knew the manager, Mr. Davis. We had golfed together years ago. This is the emergency line for priority clients, a smooth voice answered. Hello, I said, my voice steady, professional. This is Sarah Stevens, verification code Alpha 9 Zulu 4. Mrs. Stevens, the operator's tone shifted instantly to respect. How can we help you this morning? I'm invoking clause 14B of the guarantor agreement regarding the Stevens Logistics corporate account, I said. As of today, the principal, Mark Stevens, has violated the terms of our divorce settlement regarding the misuse of business assets for personal liabilities. I am formally removing my personal guarantee from all lines of credit, effective immediately. There was a pause. The silence on the other end heavy. Mrs. Stevens, the operator said cautiously, you understand that if you remove the guarantee, the system will automatically trigger a risk hold. It will freeze all liquidity. Any pending transactions will be declined. Any active cards will be suspended. I understand. This could severely embarrass the secondary cardholder if he is attempting to use the funds. I'm counting on it, I said. Proceed. Very well. Processing now. I heard the typing on the other end. Click, click, click. Those clicks were the sound of Mark's financial neck snapping. It's done, the operator said. The freeze is active. Is there anything else? Yes, I said. Flag the account for potential fraud. I want a full audit. Understood. Have a good day, Mr. Stevens. I hung up. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. My heart was racing, not from fear, but from adrenaline. It was the same rush I used to get when we closed a massive deal in the early days, but this deal was I wasn't done yet. I remembered the video I had watched a few nights ago. I ruined my cheating husband's life. In that story, the wife had simply left. She had walked away. And while that was noble, it wasn't enough for Mark. Mark didn't understand silence. Mark only understood respect. He was hosting a show. I needed to provide the grand finale. I picked up the phone for the second call. This one was to Prestige Event Rentals. They were the company supplying the massive marquee tent, the tables, the chairs and the sound system for the wedding. I knew the owner. Mark had used my personal American Express Platinum card to secure the deposit because the company card was already maxed out. Prestige Rentals, this is Mike. Hi Mike, it's Sarah Stevens. Sarah, how are you? I assumed we'd see you at the big event today, but well, Mark said you were travelling. Travelling? I laughed dryly. Is that what he said? No, Mike, I'm not travelling. I'm actually calling about the contract. Oh, is everything okay? The crew is setting up right now. The tent looks magnificent. I bet it does, I said. Listen, Mike, I need to report a stolen credit card. Oh no, which one? The Platinum Amex you have on file for the deposit and the final payment, I said. It was used without my authorisation. I've already notified Amex. They are reversing the charges as we speak. Wait, Sarah, Mike's voice dropped. He sounded panicked. That covers the entire event. The tent, the floors, the lights. That's a $60,000 contract. If the payment reverses, then you're not getting paid, Mike. I cut him off gently. And knowing Mark's current financial standing, well, let's just say his company credit lines were just frozen this morning. Frozen? Mike sounded like he was choking. If I were you, I said, leaning back in my chair, I would get down to that estate and secure your property before the wedding starts. Otherwise, you're going to be chasing a bankrupt man for money he doesn't have. Jesus Christ, Mike muttered. I have to call the dispatch team. You do that, Mike, and Mike? Yeah? Bring the trucks, all of them. I hung up. I closed my eyes and imagined the scene. Mike was a businessman. He didn't care about romance. He cared about his bottom line. If he thought he wasn't getting paid, he wouldn't just send a bill. He would come to collect. The trap was set. Now I needed eyes on the ground. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Linda. Linda, I'm here. It's disgusting. There are swans, actual swans in the fountain, and an ice sculpture of Mark and Jessica kissing. I might vomit. I smiled. Me, hang in there, send pictures. Linda sent a photo. It was a wide shot of the garden. It looked beautiful, I had to admit. White roses everywhere, a string quartet playing under a gazebo, guests arriving in Bentleys and Rolls Royces, and there in the centre of the frame was Mark. He was wearing a white tuxedo jacket. He looked like James Bond, if James Bond was a narcissist with a fraud problem. He was laughing, holding a glass of champagne, slapping a man on the back. He looked like he didn't have a care in the world. He looked like a winner. I zoomed in on his face. The arrogance was radiating off him. He truly believed he had pulled it off. He had dumped the old wife, kept the money, kept the status and upgraded to the new model. He had no idea that he was currently standing on a trapdoor and I had just pulled the lever. Linda, the ceremony is starting in 30 minutes. Jessica looks, well, the dress is tacky, too much cleavage for a morning wedding, but everyone is fawning over her. Me, just wait. Are they serving drinks? Linda, yes, open bar, top shelf. Me, good. They'll need the liquid courage soon. I went to the kitchen and made myself a sandwich. It was such a mundane task, spreading mayo on bread while destroying a man's life, but that's the reality of revenge. It's not always dramatic music and dark rain. Sometimes it's eating a turkey sandwich while waiting for the inevitable. I checked the time, 10:30 a.m. The ceremony was scheduled for 11 a.m. The reception would start at 12:30 p.m. That was when the final payments would be processed. That was when the caterer, the band and the venue would run the cards for the balance due. I sat down on the sofa and turned on the TV, but I wasn't watching it. My mind was at the Vanderbilt estate. I imagined Mark walking down the aisle. I imagined him saying his vows, for richer, for poorer. Oh, the irony. He was about to experience the poorer part faster than he could say, I do. At 11:15 a.m, Linda texted again. Linda, they're married, vows done. She cried. He cried. Fake tears, obviously. Now moving to the reception tent. It's huge. Must have cost a fortune. Me. It did. My fortune. Linda, Mark is going to the back with the planner. Looks like they're doing the final settle up before the food comes out. My heart skipped a beat. This was it. The settle up. The moment of truth. I stared at my phone waiting. 1 minute passed. 2 minutes. 5 minutes. The silence in my apartment was deafening. I could hear the refrigerator humming. I could hear a siren wailing in the distance, maybe a foreshadowing for Mark. Then my phone buzzed. It wasn't a text, it was a notification from the bank app. Alert, transaction declined. Merchant Vanderbilt Catering. Amount $22,500. Reason, account frozen. I let out a sharp laugh. It was a guttural sound halfway between a sob and a cheer. Another buzz. Alert, transaction declined. Merchant Lux Floral Designs. Amount $8,400. Reason, account frozen. Another buzz. Alert, transaction declined. Merchant The Harmony Orchestra. Amount $3,000. Reason, account frozen. My phone was lighting up like a slot machine that had just hit the jackpot. The notifications were pouring in. Every swipe, every attempt to pay, every desperate try to keep the illusion alive was hitting the brick wall I had built. I could see it. I could see Mark standing in that little back office, the smile dropping from his face, the confusion, the try it again command, the sweat starting to bead on his forehead. He would be pulling out his wallet, trying the backup card, declined, trying his personal debit, declined. He was a millionaire on paper, but in reality, he couldn't buy a bottle of water. My phone rang. It was Linda. I answered immediately. Sarah! Linda's voice was a hushed whisper, vibrating with excitement. Something is happening! Tell me, I said, leaning forward. Mark just came out of the office. He looks grey, like actually grey. He's sweating through his shirt. He just yelled at the wedding planner. What did he say? He said, fix the damn machine, Linda giggled. He thinks it's the internet connection. He'll find out soon enough, I said. Jessica is asking him what's wrong. He's waving her off. He's trying to act cool, but he's shaking, Sarah. He's literally shaking. Is the food being served? No, Linda said. The waiters have stopped. They're standing by the walls. The head caterer is on the phone. He looks pissed. Good, I said. Keep watching. I hung up. The first domino had fallen, the humiliation had begun, but the coup de grace, the fatal blow, still on its way. I looked at the clock. 11:45 a.m. Mike from Prestige Rentals would be arriving any minute, and he wasn't coming alone. I walked over to the window and looked out at the city. The world kept moving. Cars drove by. People walked their dogs. Nobody knew that in a private estate a few miles away, a kingdom was crumbling. I thought about the night Mark told me I was tired. I thought about the night he told me I was at Honda Civic. Well, Mark, the Honda Civic just cut the brake lines on your Ferrari. I went back to the kitchen and poured myself another cup of coffee. My hand was steady. My pulse was calm. I was ready for the show. And then Linda sent a video message. I clicked play. The video was shaky, filmed from under a table or behind a purse. It showed the entrance to the reception tent. The music had stopped. The chatter of the guests had died down to a confused murmur. And there, marching across the perfectly manicured lawn, was a team of men in neon yellow vests. They were led by a man in a suit holding a clipboard. And behind them was a massive flatbed truck backing up the driveway right over the just married sign. The repo men had arrived. I watched the tiny screen, mesmerised. This wasn't just revenge. This was art. The air inside the massive white marquee tent was stifling. It smelled of expensive perfume, lilies, and the distinct rising scent of panic. I watched it all unfold through the pixelated screen of my phone. Linda had positioned herself perfectly near a large floral arrangement, her phone propped up against a vase. To anyone passing by, it looked like she was recording a candid moment of the happy couple. To me, it was a live feed of an execution. The reception was supposed to be in full swing. The guests, 500 of the city's most influential people, were seated at round tables covered in satin. Crystal glasses sparkled under the chandeliers, but there was one problem. The plates were empty. It had been 45 minutes since the ceremony ended. The servers, dressed in crisp black uniforms, were standing along the perimeter of the tent like statues. They were holding silver trays covered with dome. Under those domes was the lobster beef and the filet mignon Mark had bragged about for weeks. But the trays weren't moving. I saw Mark standing near the entrance of the catering staging area. From a distance, he looked composed. He was smiling at a passing senator, nodding, shaking hands. But I zoomed in. His smile didn't reach his eyes. His jaw was clenched so tight I could see the muscle twitching. He kept glancing over his shoulder at the head caterer, a stern-looking man named Henry. Henry Henry wasn't smiling. Henry was holding a wireless card terminal. Mark leaned in, whispering something to Henry. I couldn't hear the words, but I could read the body language perfectly. Mark was doing his charming salesman routine. He was patting Henry on the shoulder. He was laughing off a concern. Henry didn't budge. He held up the machine. Mark sighed, a dramatic gesture of technology, am I right, and pulled a sleek black card from his inside pocket. My heart hammered against my ribs. That was the card. The corporate black card, the one that was supposed to have a $500,000 limit, the one that was keyed directly to my credit profile. Mark slotted the card into the machine with a flourish. He waited. He tapped his foot. Processing. I held my breath. In my apartment, the silence was absolute. In the tent, the murmur of the guests was getting louder. Then Mark's face changed. It wasn't a subtle shift. It was as if someone had punched him in the gut. He pulled the card out, looked at the chip, wiped it on his tuxedo jacket and shoved it back in. Try it again, I could almost hear him say. Henry shook his head. He looked at the screen, then looked at Mark. He said something short and sharp. Declined. Mark laughed nervously. He looked around to see if anyone was watching. He pulled out another card, the Gold Business Reserve. He inserted. Declined. I took a sip of my coffee, but I couldn't taste it. The adrenaline was coursing through my veins like electricity. This was the moment. This was the exact moment realised that the ground beneath him wasn't solid rock. It was a trapdoor. Mark was starting to sweat now, visibly. He loosened his bow tie with his shaking hand and he dug into his wallet again. He pulled out his personal debit card, the one linked to his checking account, the checking account that he usually kept empty because he funneled everything in the business to avoid tax. He tried it. Henry looked at the machine. He didn't even bother to show Mark the screen this time, and he just pulled the card out and handed it back with a look of pure disdain. Mark was frantic now. He grabbed his phone. He was dialing the bank. I knew exactly who he was calling. He was calling the VIP line, the same line I had called 3 hours ago. I imagined the conversation. This is Mark Stevens. Why are my cards declining? I have a wedding to pay for. Do you know who I am? And the operator, in that calm, professional voice, would reply, I'm sorry, Mr. Stevens. The primary guarantor on the account has revoked security privileges. All credit lines are frozen pending a full audit, and your personal accounts are currently locked due to the cross-collateralization clause. I saw Mark free. He held the phone to his ear, his mouth slightly open. He looked like a man who had just been told he had 20 seconds to live. The primary guarantor, me. He looked up. His eyes scanned the room wildly. He wasn't looking for Jessica. He wasn't looking for his parents. He was looking for me. For a split second, he looked right at the camera where Linda was filming. It was as if he could feel me watching him. His face went pale, draining of all colour. The arrogance, the swagger, the entrepreneur of the year persona, it all evaporated. In that moment, he wasn't the CEO. He wasn't the groom. He was just the broke boy I had met 20 years ago, terrified of the world, realising he had bitten the hand that fed him. Suddenly, Jessica appeared at his side. She looked annoyed. She grabbed his arm, her long nails digging into his suit fabric. Mark, she hissed loud enough that a few guests turned their heads. What is going on? Why isn't the food being served? My father is complaining. Mark flinched. He pulled his arm away. It's a technical glitch, babe. The bank system is down. It's a nationwide thing. A nationwide thing? Jessica snapped. My dad just bought a scotch at the bar 5 minutes ago and his card worked fine. Just give me a minute, Mark snapped back, his voice cracking. Henry, the caterer, had seen enough. He signalled to his staff. This was the part that broke him. The waiters who had been holding the trays of food turned around. In perfect unison, like a military drill, they began to march back into the kitchen tent. The guests gasped. Wait! Mark screamed, running after Henry. Where are you going? You can't take the food! Henry stopped and turned. He spoke loudly, his voice carrying over the sudden silence of the tent. Mr. Stevens, per our contract, final payment is due prior to service. Your cards have been declined. Your credit check has returned a high-risk flag. Until payment is secured, the food does not leave the kitchen. I'll pay you tomorrow, Mark pleaded, grabbing Henry's sleeve. I'm good for it. You know me. I'm Mark Stevens. Henry looked at Mark's hand on his sleeve, then brushed it off as if it were dirt. I know who you are, sir, Henri said coldly, and I know that without a guarantor, your company has a credit rating of 0. No cash, no lobster. He turned and walked away. The humiliation app. 500 guests were watching. These were the people Mark had spent years impressing. The bankers, the rivals, the socialites, they were whispering, they were pointing. Did his card decline? Is he broke? I heard he left his wife. Maybe she took the money? The whispers grew to a roar. It sounded like a hive of angry bees. Jessica stood there, her face flushing a deep angry red. She wasn't embarrassed for Mark, she was embarrassed for herself. This was supposed to be her coronation. She was supposed to be the queen of the logistics empire. Instead, she was the bride at a wedding with no food. Fix this, Mark, she said, her voice low and dangerous. Fix this right now, or I swear to God. I'm trying, Mark yelled, his control snapping. Sarah did this. She froze the accounts. Sarah, Jessica laughed, a cruel, mocking sound. You told me Sarah was a nobody. You told me she was just a secretary. How can a secretary freeze your accounts? Mark didn't have an answer. He couldn't admit the truth. He couldn't admit that the secretary was the owner. He couldn't admit that the nobody was the only reason he was a somebody. He stood there panting, sweat dripping down his nose. He looked around the room, desperate for a lifeline. He spotted his best friend David at a nearby table. David was a wealth real estate developer. Dave, Mark called out, forcing a smile that looked more like a grimace. Dave, buddy, come here for a second. David didn't move. He looked at his wife, then looked down at his empty plate. He pretended not to hear. Mark's face crumbled. The isolation hit him. When you have money, everyone is your friend. When the card declines, you are invisible. But it wasn't over. As Mark stood there, drowning in shame, a low rumble started to vibrate through the ground. It wasn't the music, it was heavier. The guests near the entrance of the tent started to stand up. They were looking outside. What is that? Someone asked. Is that a truck? I watched on the screen as Mark turned toward the entrance and his eyes widened. I knew what was coming. I had made the call to Mike at Prestige Rentals. Through the open flaps of the tent, a massive white truck was backing up. The backup beeper, beep, 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 cut through the awkward silence like a siren. Two men in neon vests hopped out. They didn't look like wedding guests. They looked like they were there to work. One of them, a burly guy with a clipboard, walked straight into the tent. He didn't care about the satin ribbons or the flower arrangements. He walked right onto the dance floor, his heavy boots thudding against the rented parquet flooring. Mark ran toward him. Hey, you can't be in here. This is a private event. The man ignored him. He looked at the serial number on one of the speakers. He checked his clipboard. Are you Mark Stevens? The man asked. His voice was loud, booming. Yes, get out, Mark screamed. He was unravelling completely now and his hair was messy, his eyes wild. Sir, I'm the foreman for Prestige Rentals, the man said. We received a notification of fraud regarding the deposit for this event. The cardholder, Mrs. Sarah Stevens, has reported this rental as unauthorised. It's a misunderstanding, Mark shrieked. She's my ex-wife. She's crazy. Doesn't matter, the foreman said, shrugging. The contract is void. The insurance is void, and since the final payment just bounced, we're taking it back. Taking what back? Jessica asked, stepping forward. Her voice was trembling. The foreman looked around the tent. He gestured to the chairs the guests were sitting on. He gestured to the tables. He gestured to the dance floor. Everything, ma'am, the foreman said. The tent, the tables, the chairs, the lights, the sound system, it all goes back on the truck. Now, he raised his hand and whistled. All right, boys, pack it up. From the truck, 6 more men jogged out. They started unplugging the DJ's equipment. The music died with a sad electronic whine. Chaos erupted. Guests jumped up as the crew started folding chairs, literally waiting for people to stand up so they could take the seats from under them. This is insane, a woman in a red dress shouted. Let's get out of here, a man grumbled. Mark stood in the centre of the whirlwind. He was spinning in circles. He tried to stop a worker from taking a table, but the guy just pushed past him. You can't do this, Mark cried. Tears were actually streaming down his face now. Please, just give me an hour. I can fix this. You had 90 days to fix it, buddy, I whispered to the screen. I watched as his world dismantled. Literally, the physical structure of his perfect day was being disassembled piece by piece. But the most satisfying part wasn't the furniture. It was the look on Jessica's face. She wasn't looking at Mark with love. She wasn't trying to comfort him. She was looking at him with pure, unadulterated hatred. She had married a millionaire and 10 minutes later she was standing in a field with a fraud. You lied to me, she screamed over the noise of the workers. You said you had it handled. You said she was gone. Mark stammered. You're a joke, Mark, Jessica yelled. She ripped the diamond necklace off her neck, the one I knew he had bought on credit, and threw it at him. I am not going down with you. She turned to leave, but the aisle was blocked by workers carrying out the head table. It was a disaster. It was a catastrophe. It was beautiful. But there was one final guest who hadn't made his entrance yet, the repo man for the car. I saw a black sedan pull up behind the rental truck. A man in a sharp suit stepped out. He wasn't a worker. He was a process server, and he was holding a set of keys. Mark saw him too. He stopped crying. He went still. He knew that suit. He knew what it meant. The financial ruin was bad. The humiliation was worse. But the legal consequences, that was the nail in the coffin. I leaned back in my chair, feeling the warmth of the coffee cup in my hand. My heart was beating a steady rhythm of victory. "You look tired, Sarah," he had said. I looked at the screen, at the man sobbing in the middle of a collapsing tent. "I'm not tired anymore, Mark," I said softly. "I'm just getting started." The man in the charcoal suit didn't run. He didn't shout. He moved with the terrifying quiet confidence of a man who knows the law is entirely on his side. While the workers from the rental company were busy folding chairs and dismantling the stage, creating a cacophony of clanging metal and confused shouting. This new arrival walked straight line through the chaos. He was like a shark swimming through a school of frantic fish. I watched him on my screen, my breath catching in my throat. I knew him. Well, I didn't know him personally, but I knew what he represented. His name was Mr. Sterling. I had hired his firm, Asset Recovery Solutions, 3 days ago. Mr. Sterling wasn't a wedding guest. He wasn't a caterer. He was the consequences of Mark's actions, wearing a silk tie. Mark was currently busy screaming at a rental guy who was rolling up the white carpet from the aisle. "You can't take the carpet! We haven't even taken the photos yet!" Mark was yelling, his voice cracking with hysteria. Then he felt a tap on his shoulder. Mark spun around, fists clenched, ready to fight another worker. But when he saw Mr. Sterling, his hand dropped. The colour drained from his face so fast it looked like he might faint. "Mark Stevens?" Mr. Sterling asked. His voice was calm, baritone, and carried perfectly over the noise of the dismantling wedding. "Who are you?" Mark whispered. He knew. You could see it in his eyes. He knew exactly who this was. "My name is Agent Sterling. I represent the lien holder for the 2024 Porsche 911 Cabriolet parked at the entrance, as well as the overarching creditor for Stevens Logistics." Mark swallowed hard. "Look, can we do this later, please? It's my wedding day." "I'm afraid not," Sterling said, pulling a folded document from his jacket pocket. "I am serving you with a court order for immediate repossession of the vehicle due to fraudulent application data and default on the guarantor's terms. Furthermore," Sterling paused, looking around at the guests who had stopped leaving to watch the new drama. He raised his voice slightly, ensuring the nearby tables could hear. "I am also serving you with a summons. You are being sued for obtaining credit under false pretenses. The assets you listed as collateral, specifically the logistics company and the marital home, were not yours to pledge at the time of the loan application." The word fraud hung in the air like a poisonous cloud. Mark stepped back, shaking his head. No, that's a lie. I own the company. I am the face of the brand." "Being the face isn't the same as being the owner, Mr. Stevens," Sterling said dryly. "And right now, the owner, your ex-wife, has flagged the vehicle as unauthorised property in the possession of a non-employee." "She's vindictive," Mark shouted, pointing at the phone Linda was holding, though he didn't know I was watching. "She's doing this to ruin me." "She is protecting her credit score, sir," Sterling corrected him. "Now the keys, please." He held out a gloved hand. Mark looked at the hand, then he looked at the car. The Porsche was parked on the gravel drive, decorated with white ribbons and a "just married" sign on the back, and it was supposed to be their getaway car. It was the symbol of his new flashy life. "I don't have them," Mark lied. It was a pathetic, childish lie. Sterling didn't blink. "Mr. Stevens, the tow truck is already blocking the exit. If you don't hand over the keys, we will drag it onto the flatbed and it will damage the transmission and you will be billed for that too. Do you really want to add another $10,000 to your debt today?" Mark looked at Jessica. Jessica was standing a few feet away, her arms crossed over her chest. Her mascara was running down her cheeks, but she didn't look sad. She looked furious. She looked like a predator that realised it had trapped the wrong prey. "Give him the keys, Mark," she snapped. "Jess, baby, I can fix this," Mark pleaded, turning to her. "It's just a misunderstanding. I'll call the lawyers on Monday. We can take my parents' car." "Give him the keys." She enunciated every word like a gunshot. Mark reached into his pocket. His hand was trembling so bad he dropped the keys on the grass. The clatter of the keys hitting the ground was the sound of his ego shattering. Sterling didn't bend down. He looked at Mark, waiting. Defeated, Mark bent his knees. He knelt in the dirt in his $5,000 tuxedo and picked up the keys. He placed them in Sterling's hand. "Thank you," Sterling said. "You have been served." He turned and walked away toward the car. I watched as Sterling got into the driver's seat of the Porsche. He started the engine. The roar of the motor, the sound Mark loved so much, echoed through the tent. Sterling revved it once, then slowly drove it toward the tow truck. The just married can rattled against the gravel as the car was driven away. It was poetic justice in its purest form, but the real explosion was just beginning. Mark stood up, brushing the dirt off his knees. He turned to the crowd. About 200 guests were still there, too shocked to leave. They were witnessing a car crash, and they couldn't look away. "Everyone!" Mark clapped his hands, a manic, desperate sound. "Everyone, please! There's plenty of champagne. The food is coming. We're going to order pizzas. It's going to be fun. A fun, quirky wedding story, right?" He laughed, a high-pitched, broken laugh. Nobody laughed back. Then Jessica moved. She walked into the middle of the dance floor, where the rental guys were currently unplugging the spotlights. She stood in the only patch of light remaining. "Fun?" she asked. Her voice was quiet, but in the silence it carried. Mark froze. "Babe, don't you babe me," she hissed. She walked closer to him. "You told me you were worth $10 million. You told me the company ran itself. You told me your ex-wife was a penniless leech who you carried for 20 years. "She is," Mark lied. She's manipulating the banks." "Bullshit," Jessica screamed. The facade of the elegant bride was gone. She was a street fighter now. "I saw the look on that repo man's face, Mark. He wasn't lying. The cards declined. The car is gone. The tent is being taken down while we are standing in it." She gestured wildly around her. "You're not a millionaire, Mark. You're a fraud. You're broke." "It's temporary," Mark begged. He reached for her hand. "Jessica, please. I love you. We can build it back. We have the brand." "You don't have a brand," she yelled, pulling her hand away as if he were contagious. "You have nothing. And you know what that makes you? It makes you a liar. And it makes me look like an idiot." She looked at the guests. She saw her friends, her model colleagues, the people she had bragged to about marrying a tycoon. They were whispering. They were pitying her. That was the breaking point. Jessica could handle a bad boy. She could handle a cheater, but she couldn't handle being pitied. She reached up and grabbed the veil pinned to her hair. With a violent tug, she ripped it off. A chunk of her expensive hairdo came with it, but she didn't care. She threw the veil at Mark's face. "I am not marrying a loser," she spat. Mark caught the veil. He looked at it, confused, as if he didn't understand what it was. "Jess, we're already married. We signed the papers an hour ago." Jessica laughed. It was a cold, cruel sound. "Annulment, Mark. Fraud is grounds for annulment. My lawyer will call you." "Oh, wait, you probably can't afford a phone anymore." She turned on her heel. She gathered her massive skirt in her hands and marched toward the exit. "Where are you going?" Mark cried out, chasing after her a few steps. "I'm calling an Uber," she shouted back without looking. "And I'm going to the club." Alone, Mark stopped. He stood there, holding the crumpled veil in one hand and a useless champagne flute in the other. He looked around. The rental crew had finished clearing the tables. The tent was half empty. The guests were awkwardly shuffling toward the parking lot, avoiding eye contact with him. His parents were sitting at a table in the corner, heads in their hands, too ashamed to move. He was alone. And then he saw it. He saw Linda. Linda hadn't moved. She was still standing by the floral arrangement, holding her phone up. Mark blinked. His brain, fogged by panic and shock, finally made the connection. He walked toward her. His steps were slow, heavy. He looked like a man walking to the gallows. "Linda?" he croaked. Linda didn't lower the phone. She kept it steady. "Hi, Mark," she said cheerfully. "Why?" Mark licked his dry lips. "Why are you filming?" "For Sarah," Linda said simply. The name hit him like a physical blow. He flinched. He looked directly in the camera lens. He looked right at me. In that moment, across the miles of fibre optic cables, our eyes met. He saw it all. He saw the calculation. He saw the clause 14B. He saw the tired wife who wasn't tired at all. He realised that while he was playing checkers, I had been playing 4D chess. "Sarah," he whispered. It wasn't angry. It was terrified. "You did this." Linda nodded. "She sure did. She said to tell you something." Mark stared at her, his eyes wide and watery. "What?" She said, Linda paused for dramatic effect. She said, don't worry about the bill for the wedding. You won't have to pay it. Mark looked confused. I won't? No, Linda smiled, because you're going to be in bankruptcy court anyway. The vendors will just sue you there. Mark's knees gave out. He literally collapsed onto the grass. He sat there in the dirt, surrounded by the ruins of his vanity. I watched him cry. It wasn't the fake crying he did when he wanted something. It was ugly, guttural sobbing. The sobbing of a man who realises he has lost everything. His money, his reputation, his woman and his dignity. I felt emptiness. I waited for the rush of joy. I waited for the thrill. But as I watched him sob, clutching the veil of the mistress who had just dumped him, I just felt a deep, profound sense of closure. I wasn't happy that he was in pain. I was happy that I was free. I realised then that I didn't hate him anymore. Hate requires energy. Hate requires you to care. I didn't care. He was just a stranger who owed a lot of money to a lot of people. Okay, Linda, I said to the empty room, cut the feed. On the screen, Linda seemed to hear me. She lowered the phone. The screen went black. I sat in silence for a moment. The show was over. The credits were rolling. I stood up and walked to the window. The sun was setting now, casting a golden glow over the city. My phone buzzed again. It was a text from Henderson, my lawyer. Henderson, police report filed for the car. The bank has officially seized the company assets to cover the default. The board of directors is calling an emergency meeting for Monday morning. They want you back, Sarah. I smiled. They wanted me back, of course they did. They wanted the engine back. They realised that the shiny hood ornament was useless without the motor. But did I want them? I looked at my small apartment. It was quiet. It was peaceful. It was mine. Mark was likely sitting in a police station right now trying to explain why he was driving a stolen car. Jessica was probably at a club looking for her next victim. And me? I had a decision to make. I could go back. I could walk into that boardroom on Monday, take my seat at the head of the table and run the empire I built. I could crush Mark completely, fire him and leave him destitute. Or I could do something else. I picked up the phone and dialed Henderson. It's done, I said. I heard. Henderson laughed. It's all over the news. Local tycoons, wedding disaster. Twitter is having a field day. Henderson, I said, my voice serious. Draft the paperwork. For the lawsuit? No, I said, for the sale. The sale. Henderson sounded shocked. Sarah, the company is yours. You can take it all back. I know, I said, but I don't want it. It has his name on the door. It has his stench in the walls. Sell it. Sell my shares. Sell the intellectual property. Sell the client list to our biggest competitor. But that will destroy the company, Henderson stammered. Mark will be left with nothing but the debts. Exactly, I said. He wanted to be the face of the company. Fine, let him be the face of its bankruptcy. I'm cashing out, which you'll walk away with millions, Henderson calculated, and he'll be left with the liabilities. Do it, I said. I hung up. I walked to the kitchen and poured the rest of the cold coffee down the sink. I washed the mug. I dried it. I put it away. Then I went to my closet and I pushed aside the grey suits and the sensible shoes, the Honda Civic clothes. In the back, there was a red dress. I hadn't worn it in years. Mark said it was too loud. He said it drew too much attention. I pulled it out. I held it up against my body in the mirror. It fit perfectly. I wasn't the shadow behind the throne anymore. I wasn't the victim. I was Sarah. And for the first time in 20 years, the only person I had to answer to was myself. The wedding was over. The marriage was dead. But my life was just beginning. The aftermath of a hurricane is always quieter than the storm itself. That's what nobody tells you about revenge. You expect fireworks, you expect a parade. But what you actually get is a silence so profound it feels like the world has reset. 3 months had passed since the wedding from hell, as the local tabloids called it. I was sitting in a cafe in Paris. Yes, Paris, the real one, not the fake-themed hotel in Las Vegas Mark used to take me to because it was cheaper. I was sitting at a small round table on the sidewalk watching the Seine River flow by. The autumn air was crisp and I was wearing a cashmere coat that I bought with my own money for myself. But before I tell you about the peace I found here, I need to tell you what happened back home. Because the destruction of Mark Stevens didn't end when the tent came down. That was just the beginning of the slide. In the week following the wedding, Mark's life imploded with the speed of a collapsing star. The viral video Linda took, it didn't just stay in our circle. It went everywhere. Millions of views. The The title, "I Ruined My Cheating Husband's Life," became a trending topic on Twitter. Mark became a meme. His tear-stained face holding the crumpled veil was the laughingstock of the internet. But the internet fame was the least of his problems. The real problem was the math. Remember clause 14b, the one that froze the assets? Well, when I instructed Henderson to sell the company, we executed a manoeuvre known in the business world as the asset strip. It sounds violent because it is. I owned the intellectual property. I owned the client lists. I owned the logistics software. Mark owned the brand, Stevens Logistics. So I sold the IP, the clients and the software to our biggest competitor for a multi-million-dollar cash buyout. They were thrilled to acquire our technology. Mark was left with the shell. He kept the LLC, he kept the office lease, and most importantly, he kept the debts. Since the company no longer had any assets or clients because I sold them, it had no revenue, but it still had the loans. The loans that Mark had personally guaranteed when I revoked my signature. He tried to sue me, of course. He hired a cheap lawyer because he couldn't afford a good one. I didn't even have to show up to court. Henderson handled it. He simply showed the judge the divorce settlement where Mark explicitly stated, "The company is mine." The judge ruled in my favour. Mark had fought so hard to claim the company was his alone that the court agreed with him. It was his. And so were the millions of dollars in debt attached to it. He lost the house first. The bank foreclosed on the mansion within 60 days. I heard from neighbours that he refused to leave. The sheriffs had to escort him out. He left with 2 suitcases and a box of his Entrepreneur of the Year trophies. Trophies that were now just worthless plastic. Then came the social exile. The country club revoked his membership. The business association removed him from the board. His friends, the ones who drank his champagne and laughed at his jokes, stopped answering his calls. They didn't want to be associated with a failure. They didn't want the bad luck to rub off on them. And Jessica didn't wait for the dust to settle. We found out later that she'd been cheating on Mark before the wedding with a personal trainer at her gym. When the money dried up, she simply blocked Mark's number and moved in with the trainer. She gave an interview to a gossip blog claiming Mark had deceived her and that she was a victim of emotional fraud. She played the victim card perfectly. Mark was left with nothing. No wife, no mistress, no house, no car, no company. Just an empty apartment and a lot of time to think. I saw him one last time before I left for Europe. It wasn't planned. It was purely accidental. A final twist fate. I was leaving Henderson's office downtown, signing the final papers for the sale of my shares, and I walked out of the glass building, feeling light, feeling free. I was waiting for my ride when I saw a man sitting on a bench near the bus stop. He was wearing a suit, but it was ill-fitting, wrinkled. His tie was loose. He was eating a sandwich wrapped in foil. It took me a moment to recognise him. He looked 10 years older. His hair was greying at the temples, not the distinguished grey he used to dye it, but the dull grey of stress. He had lost weight. It was Mark. I could have walked away. I could have turned around and gone back inside, but something made me stay. Curiosity, closure. I walked over. My heels clicked on the pavement. He looked up. When he saw me, he stopped chewing. His eyes widened. He looked at my dress, a sharp navy blue power suit. He looked at the glow on my skin. He looked at the confidence radiating off me. "Sarah," he whispered. His voice was hoarse. "Hello, Mark," I said. My voice was steady. No anger, no shake. Just indifference. He put the sandwich down. He looked ashamed. You look good," he stammered. I feel good," I replied. He let out a short, bitter laugh. "You won. You destroyed me, Sarah. Are you happy? Is this what you wanted, to see me eating a tuna sandwich at a bus stop?" I looked at him, really looked at him. "I didn't destroy you, Mark," I said softly. "You destroyed yourself. You built a life on a foundation of lies and debt. You thought you were flying, but you were just falling with style. All I did was remove the safety net you didn't even know I was holding. I was the face," he muttered, repeating his old mantra. "I was the vision. You were the ego," I corrected him, "and the ego is expensive." He looked down at his shoes. They were scuffed. The old Mark would never have worn scuffed shoes. "I have nothing," he said, his voice cracking. "I'm applying for sales jobs, but nobody will hire me. They Google my name and the wedding video comes up. I'm a joke, Sarah. I'm 46 years old and I'm a joke." He looked up at me, and for the first time, I saw genuine fear in his eyes. He hesitated. Can you help me just alone until I get back on my feet? We were married for 20 years. Doesn't that mean anything? The question hung in air. Doesn't that mean anything? I thought about the night he told me I was a Honda Civic. I thought about the night he told me I looked tired. I thought about him rushing the divorce to marry a 24-year-old. It meant everything to me, Mark, I said. That's why it hurt so much that it meant nothing to you. I opened my purse. Mark's eyes lit up. He thought I was reaching for my checkbook. He thought, she's still Sarah, she's still the fixer, she's still the doormat. I pulled out a business card. It wasn't mine. Here, I said, handing it to him. He took it. He looked at it confused. Dr. Harris, who is this? He's a therapist, I said. He helped me when my husband left me for a younger woman. He's very good. He can help you understand why you need external validation to feel like a man. Mark stared at the card. His face fell. I don't need therapy. I need money. No, Mark, I said, turning away. You need to learn how to survive without someone else carrying you. You wanted independence. This is what it looks like. Sarah, he called out as I started walking away. Sarah, wait, I'm sorry, I made a mistake. We can fix this. I miss you. I didn't stop. I didn't look back. His voice faded to the noise of the city traffic. Oh, that was the last time I saw him. I heard later that he eventually got a job selling used cars in a neighbouring town. A Honda dealership, ironically. Life has a funny sense of humour. He lives in a studio apartment, he pays his bills, and he lives a quiet, small life. And honestly, it's the best thing that could have happened to him. For the first time, he is actually earning his keep. As for me, I'm in Paris. I didn't just come here to escape. I came here to find myself, the Sarah who existed before Mark, the Sarah who loved art, who loved history, who loved to laugh. And I'm not alone. Remember I told you I met someone? His name is Julian. He's not a CEO. He's not famous. He's an architect who restores old buildings. He sees the value in things that have been broken. He sees the beauty in the foundation, not just the facade. We met at a gallery. He didn't know who I was. He didn't know about the company or the scandal. He just saw a woman in a red dress staring at a painting. We're taking it slow. We split the bill at dinner. He asked for my opinion. He listens when I speak. Yesterday we were walking by the river and he took my hand. His hand felt warm, solid. You seem far away, he said gently. Where are you? I was just thinking, I smiled at him, about how heavy I used to feel and how light I feel now. He squeezed my hand. Heavy things are meant to be put down, Sarah. He's right. I put the heavy thing down. I put Mark down. I put the anger down. I realised that revenge isn't about making the other person suffer forever. It's about ensuring they can never hurt you again. It's about closing the door so firmly that the draft never gets in. I often think about the woman I was in chapter 1, the woman standing in the shadows, holding the champagne, feeling invisible. If I could go back and tell her one thing, I would say, you are not the shadow. You are the sun. And if he can't handle the heat, let him burn. So, to everyone listening to my story, if you're feeling invisible right now, if you're the one doing all the work while someone else takes the credit, if you are being told you are tired or old or boring, listen to me. Check your assets, check your worth, and check your contract. Don't be afraid to be the villain in their story if it means you get to be the hero in yours. Don't be afraid to cut the card. Don't be afraid to call the repo man. Don't be afraid to walk away. Because the moment you stop carrying them, they will fall. But you will fly. Mark Stevens wanted a trophy life. He ended up with a participation prize. I wanted a real life, and I finally got it. The coffee in Paris tastes different. It tastes like victory. Thank you for listening to my journey. It wasn't easy to relive it, but it was necessary. If my story gave you a sense of justice, or maybe just the courage to look at your own relationships a little closer, then it was worth telling. We often think we are weak because we love hard, but loving hard isn't a weakness. Staying when the love is gone, that's the weakness. Leaving is the strength. I hope you never have to use a clause 14b. I hope you never have to ruin a wedding, but if you do, make sure you have a friend like Linda to record it. This has been a story of betrayal, revenge, and ultimately rebirth. If you enjoyed this emotional roller coaster and want to hear more stories about real people overcoming impossible odds, please do me a huge favour. Scroll down and hit that subscribe button for my channel, Voice of Sneha. Turn on the notifications so you never miss a chapter. I share stories like this every week, stories that remind you that even when you're down, you're never out. Leave a comment below. Tell me, what would you have done in my shoes? Would you have helped Mark at the bus stop? Or would you have walked away just like I did? I really want to know what you think. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. Remember, you are the CEO of your own life. Don't let anyone else sign the checks. Stay strong, stay smart, and stay tuned. This is Voice of Sneha signing off from Paris. Au revoir.